At 2:37 on the morning of September 19, 1943, Lieutenant Robert Caldwell sits alone in the rain-soaked cockpit of Douglas B-18 reconnaissance aircraft at Henderson Field, Guadalcanal, staring at a storm front so violent it looks alive. Lightning splits the tropical night every few seconds, illuminating towering cumulonimbus clouds that rise beyond 20,000 feet like mountains of black iron. Somewhere inside that churning wall of water, wind, and electricity, 9 B-25 Mitchell bombers are flying blind, scattered across 100 square miles of chaos. 72 men, all of them lost, all of them running out of fuel. All of them minutes from ditching in the ocean in 15-foot swells with zero chance of rescue. The tower has lost radio contact. The mission clock is ticking. Major Frank Koenig, 41 years old, a veteran of the Doolittle raid and a man whose hands have not shaken since Tokyo, grips Caldwell by the shoulder in the operations shack and says just for words, "Get them out, now." Caldwell is 24 years old. He has 19 months of weather reconnaissance under his belt and exactly 0 combat kills to his name. He flies an unarmed, outdated twin-engine plane that most fighter jocks call a flying weather station, a relic, dead weight. For 17 months, he has mapped typhoon tracks, measured wind shear, radioed temperature gradients to headquarters so the bombers and fighters can plan their strikes. Useful work, they say vital work, but invisible. His college roommate, Jimmy Hargrove, flies P-38 Lightnings out of Port Moresby and has 4 confirmed kills painted on his fuselage. His younger brother, Tom, serves on a destroyer and has seen surface action 3 times. Caldwell flies into storms alone, comes back soaked and shivering, and gets a handshake and a nod. No medals, no stories for the folks back home. Just numbers on a weather chart and another mission at dawn. But tonight, everything changes. Tonight, the invisible man becomes the only hope. Robert Caldwell grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the oldest son of a postal clerk and a school teacher. While other boys played baseball, he spent afternoons in the basement fixing old radios, pulling apart circuit boards, reading sky maps his grandfather had sketched during the First World War. He learned to predict rain by the smell of the wind, to read clouds by their color and shape, to sense a storm hours before the barometer confirmed it. His teachers thought he was odd. His father thought he was wasting time. But when he was 17, he correctly predicted a tornado that saved 3 families in his county, and the local newspaper ran a photo. Young Caldwell standing in a cornfield, pointing at the sky. When Pearl Harbor was bombed in December of 1941, Caldwell was 19 years old and enrolled at the University of Iowa studying meteorology. He dropped out the next day and enlisted in the Army Air Forces, determined to be a fighter pilot like the men in the recruiting posters. He aced every test. His reflexes were sharp, his vision perfect, his gunnery scores excellent. But during advanced training at Luke Field in Arizona, an instructor named Captain Arthur Brennan noticed something unusual. Caldwell could navigate by dead reckoning in conditions that made other pilots panic. He could sense wind drift without instruments. He could read the inside of a thunderhead like other men read road maps. Brennan pulled him aside one afternoon in May of 1942 and said, "You're wasted in fighters, kid. I'm recommending you for weather reconnaissance." Caldwell protested. Weather reconnaissance, that was not why he had joined. That was not glory. That was not combat. Brennan looked at him hard and said, "You think flying into a typhoon alone is not combat? You think mapping a storm so 1,000 men can survive is not worth doing?" Caldwell shut his mouth and reported to the weather squadron at Hickam Field 3 weeks later. For 17 months, he has flown missions no one talks about. Sorties that vanish from the official record the moment he lands. Solo flights into tropical disturbances over the Coral Sea, measuring barometric pressure at altitudes that ice the wings and freeze the instruments. Night flights through electrical storms that turn his radio into a wall of static and his compass into a spinning toy. Every mission, he comes back alone, files a report full of numbers and wind vectors, and watches the bomber crews take off the next morning using his data to strike Japanese positions. They get the headlines. He gets a cup of coffee and 6 hours of sleep before the next storm. He writes to Helen, his high school sweetheart, every week. She writes back, her letters full of news from Cedar Rapids, updates on his family, small-town gossip, and always, at the end, the same line. Whatever happens, Come home. He keeps her photo taped above the altimeter in his cockpit, her face smiling. Forever 22, forever waiting. He has promised her he will survive this war. Tonight, he realizes that 72 other men have made the same promise to 72 other people, and if he fails, all those promises die in the storm. At 1800 hours on September 18th, 9 B-25 Mitchell bombers from the 3rd Bomb Group lifted off from Henderson Field on a high-priority night strike mission. The target, a Japanese supply convoy, reported steaming south through the slot toward Bougainville, carrying reinforcements, ammunition, and construction equipment for a new airfield. Intelligence estimates the convoy at 6 cargo ships, 2 destroyers, and air cover from Rabaul at first light. If the convoy reaches Bougainville intact, the Japanese will extend their fighter range another 100 miles, threatening every Allied base in the central Solomons. The strike window is narrow. Hit the convoy after dark, before dawn, when the Zeros cannot fly. Captain Harold Mitchell, 32 years old, a veteran of Midway and Guadalcanal with 41 missions and a Navy Cross, leads the formation. His crew calls him Old Man Mitchell even though he is younger than half the men on the field, because he never panics, never rushes, never loses his cool. He has brought his crew through hell 3 times, and they trust him like a father. His co-pilot is Lieutenant Danny Forsyth, 21 years old, a kid from Boston who still writes his mother every Sunday and keeps a rosary wrapped around his control yoke. The weather forecast is marginal, isolated thunderstorms possible along the route, visibility reduced, but risk acceptable. The meteorology officer, a junior lieutenant fresh from stateside training, reviews the charts and gives the green light. Caldwell, who has flown the route twice in the past week, is not consulted. He is in the maintenance tent, filing a report on a tropical disturbance developing northwest of the Solomons, a system that is intensifying faster than the models predict. He notes the anomaly, mentions it to the operations clerk, and is told, "We'll keep an eye on it." The 9 bombers take off in loose formation, climbing into the dusk. The sun sets behind them, painting the sky red and gold, and within 20 minutes they are over open water, heading north by northwest. At 1847 hours, the first raindrops hit their windscreens. At 1852, they entered the outer edge of the storm. Within 3 minutes, the formation disintegrates. Turbulence slams the bombers up and down like toys. Rain hammers the canopies so hard the pilots cannot see their own wingtips. Lightning flashes inside the clouds, blinding the navigators, turning their instruments into flickering ghosts. Compasses spin uselessly, influenced by the electrical charge in the air. Radios crackle with static, voices shouting over each other. And then, one by one, the voices cut out. At 1914 hours, Captain Mitchell transmits the last message anyone will hear for 5 hours. Blue flight. This is Blue Leader. We are turning back. Visibility 0. Compasses unreliable. Attempting to break south. All aircraft follow me if you can see me. If not, make your own way home. Good luck. Then silence. In the operations shack at Henderson Field, Major Koenig listens to the static and feels his stomach turn to ice. He tries to raise blue flight every 5 minutes. Nothing. He sends to P-38 scouts to search the southern perimeter at 2000 hours. They return after 18 minutes, reporting 0 visibility, dangerous icing, and conditions too severe for visual search. He requests a Navy PBY Catalina flying boat from Espiritu Santo for a night search and rescue operation. The response comes back terse and final. No night launches authorized in these conditions. Too dangerous. Wait for dawn. Koenig does the math. The B-25s carry enough fuel for 7 hours of flight at cruise settings. They took off at 1800 hours. It is now 20 to 30 hours. That gives them 90 minutes of fuel remaining. Maybe less if they have been fighting headwinds or flying at full power trying to climb out of the storm. 90 minutes. After that, they will ditch in the ocean one by one, in darkness, in swells that will smash the aircraft to pieces on impact. Even if the crews survive the ditching, their life rafts will be scattered across 100 square miles of storm-tossed sea with 0 chance of being found before dawn. And by dawn, the Japanese will control the airspace. Koenig paces the operations shack, fists clenched, jaw locked. He has lost men before. He has written letters to families, signed reports listing men as missing in action, attended memorial services where no body was buried because no body was ever found. But he has never lost 9 aircraft and 72 men in one night because of a storm that should never have been there. He knows in his gut that someone made a mistake. Someone missed the signs. Someone did not read the weather right. And then he remembers Caldwell. Major Koenig finds Caldwell in the maintenance tent at 200 hours, hunched over a weather chart, drinking cold coffee from a dented tin cup. Caldwell has been awake for 27 hours. His last mission, a routine wind survey over the Northern Solomons, ended at 1400 hours the previous day. He was planning to file his report and collapse on his cot for 6 hours of sleep before the next sortie at dawn. But the operations clerk mentioned the missing bombers, and Caldwell pulled the weather charts, cross-referenced the pressure gradients, tracked the storm's movement, and realized with sickening clarity that the disturbance he had noted 12 hours earlier had exploded into a full tropical storm, with winds exceeding 130 kilometers per hour and a core that extended from 2,000 to 20,000 feet. He looks up when Koenig enters, and he knows, before the major says a word, why he is there. Caldwell, Koenig says, his voice flat and exhausted. I need you airborne in 20 minutes. Caldwell sets down his coffee cup carefully, buying himself a second to think. Sir, the storm is still. Koenig cuts him off. 9 B-25s are lost in it. 72 men. Fuel critical. No other assets available. You are the only pilot on this island who can do this. Caldwell feels his stomach tighten. He has flown into worse storms, but never at night, never with the mission being search and rescue, never with lives depending on him finding 9 invisible aircraft in 1,000 square miles of chaos. Sir, with respect, I fly weather reconnaissance. I map storms. I do not run search and rescue in zero visibility in the middle of the night. Koenig leans forward, his face inches from Caldwell's, and his voice drops to a whisper that is somehow louder than a shout. Lieutenant, those men are going to die unless someone goes in there and brings them out. You are the only pilot on this island with the training, the experience, and the equipment to do it. So stop arguing and get your gear. Caldwell does not argue. He stands, grabs his flight jacket, his gloves, his chart case, and his flashlight, and walks out into the rain. His hands are shaking, not from cold, not from fear. From the weight of what Koenig has just laid on him. 72 lives. 72 men with families, with promises, with futures. And if he fails, all of them die, and he will carry that failure for the rest of his life. He crosses the muddy tarmac to his aircraft, the B-18 that has been his home for 17 months, a battered, weary machine with 7,200 hours on the airframe and dull green paint that has faded to gray. The crew chief, Sergeant Ed Lawson, 36 years old, a former crop duster from Nebraska with grease-stained hands and a face like worn leather, is already running pre-flight checks. He looks up when Caldwell approaches and shakes his head. Heard the news. You are really going up in this. No choice, Caldwell says quietly. Lawson hands him a flashlight and a folded map marked with the last known position of Blue Flight. Fuel topped off. Radio direction finder calibrated this morning. Engines are running rough, but they will hold. If you are going to fly into that mess, at least you will have working instruments. Caldwell climbs into the cockpit and straps in. The seat is cold and damp. The windscreen is streaked with rain. He runs through the checklist by muscle memory. Mixture rich. Throttles forward 1 inch. Fuel selectors on main tanks. Magnetos check. Flaps up. Trim set for takeoff. He primes the engines, hits the starters, and the twin radials cough, spit blue smoke, and settle into a rough, uneven rumble. He lets them warm up for 90 seconds, watching the oil pressure climb, the cylinder head temperatures stabilize. Then he releases the brakes and taxis to the end of runway 30, where a lone ground crewman stands in the rain with a flashlight, waving him forward. The wind is gusting at 35 knots, pushing the tail of the B-18 sideways. Caldwell corrects with rudder, lines up on the centerline painted in fading white, and pushes the throttles to full power. The engines roar, the airframe shudders. The bomber accelerates slowly, sluggishly, heavy with fuel. At 70 knots, he rotates, pulling back on the yoke, and the nose lifts. At 78 knots, the wheels leave the ground. The gear retracts with a solid thunk. The runway lights fall away below. And Caldwell turns north, directly into the storm, alone. Within 2 minutes of takeoff, Caldwell is inside solid cloud. The world outside the cockpit vanishes, replaced by a gray void that presses against the windscreen like a living thing. Rain hammers the glass so hard he cannot see the propeller hubs 3 feet in front of him. The aircraft bucks and shudders, caught in invisible hands that throw it up, down, sideways, without warning. At 4,000 feet, the turbulence worsens. At 6,000, the airframe groans under the strain, rivets creaking, metal flexing. Caldwell keeps his eyes locked on the instruments, ignoring the screaming instinct to look outside, to find a horizon, to see something real. The artificial horizon gyroscope spins lazily, unreliable, influenced by the violent motion. He ignores it and flies by feel, by the pressure on the control yoke, by the angle of the rain streaking across the side windows. He has done this 100 times before, but never at night, never with 72 lives depending on him, never with the knowledge that if he makes one mistake, if he loses control for even 5 seconds, he will spiral into the ocean and no one will ever know what happened. He levels off at 8,000 feet and forces himself to breathe slowly, steadily, fighting the adrenaline that makes his hands shake. He toggles the radio direction finder, the RDF, a simple but temperamental device, a rotating loop antenna mounted on top of the fuselage that picks up radio signals and indicates their direction relative to the aircraft. If the lost bombers are transmitting, even intermittently, the RDF can point him toward them. If they are not transmitting, or if their radios are dead, or if the storm is swallowing every signal, then he is flying blind, searching for 9 invisible needles in a 1,000-square-mile haystack. He tunes the radio to the bomber frequency, 243.0 megacycles, and listens. Static. White noise. The hiss and crackle of rain on metal, of lightning in the clouds, of 1,000 electrical ghosts. He adjusts the tuning knob slowly, carefully, listening for any human sound. Nothing. He tries the emergency frequency. Nothing. He tries the navigation beacon frequency. Nothing. The bombers are either not transmitting, or their radios are dead, or they are too far away, scattered across the storm. Caldwell thinks, forcing his brain to slow down, to analyze, to calculate. The bombers were headed north when they entered the storm at 1850 hours. Last known position, approximately 60 miles northwest of Henderson Field. They attempted to turn back, which means they should have been heading south or southeast, but they never arrived. Which means they got disoriented, turned around, lost in zero visibility with malfunctioning compasses. In that situation, a pilot will fly by instinct, by feel, and instinct in a storm is almost always wrong. They could be anywhere. They could be heading east, toward open ocean and death. They could be heading west, toward Japanese-held islands and capture. They could be flying in circles, burning fuel, waiting to die. He keys his microphone, his voice calm and steady despite the fear coiling in his chest. Blue Flight, this is Weatherbird. Do you read? Silence. Blue Flight, if you can hear me, transmit on any frequency. I am searching your last known position. Silence. He adjusts the RDF loop manually, sweeping it through 360 degrees, listening for any faint pulse, any carrier wave, any sign of life. And then, just for a moment, he hears it, a brief crackle, a fragment of a voice, too faint to understand, buried under layers of static, but unmistakably human. The RDF needle twitches, swings 15 degrees to the left, then falls back to 0. Caldwell's heart slams against his ribs. They are out there. Somewhere in that direction. Alive. Transmitting. He banks the B-18 hard to the left, corrects for the wind pushing him sideways, and flies toward the signal, into the heart of the storm. For 8 minutes, Caldwell flies blind, holding his new heading, straining to hear anything on the radio. The turbulence is worse here, throwing the aircraft up and down like a toy in the hands of an angry child. At one point, the B-18 drops to 100 feet in less than 2 seconds, and Caldwell's head slams into the canopy frame hard enough to split the skin above his left eyebrow. Blood runs down his face, warm and sticky. He tastes copper, wipes his forehead with the back of his glove, and keeps flying. The altimeter unwinds to 7,100 feet. He adds power, pulls back on the yoke, and climbs back to 8,000, fighting every foot of altitude. Then he hears it again, a voice, clearer this time, broken by static but unmistakable. Anyone. Fuel at 20. Cannot hold altitude. Losing right engine. The RDF needle swings to the left again, steadier now, pointing northwest. Caldwell keys his mic. Blue Flight, this is Weatherbird. I have your signal. Transmit continuously so I can home on you. A pause. Then a voice, young and scared and flooded with relief. Weatherbird, Blue 3, is that you, Caldwell? Jesus Christ, we thought we were dead. It is Lieutenant Danny Forsyth, co-pilot of Blue 3, the skinny kid from Boston who once bought Caldwell a beer at the officers' club and called him the luckiest man alive because he never had to face enemy fire. Caldwell feels a surge of emotion so strong it nearly chokes him. They are alive. At least one crew is alive. Blue 3, I need you to transmit for 30 seconds straight. Any words. Just keep talking so I can track you. Roger, Weatherbird. Transmitting now. We are at 6,000 feet. Heading unknown. Fuel at 20 minutes, maybe less. We lost the rest of the formation hours ago. We do not know where we are. Visibility is 0. Rain is unbelievable. We hit something. Maybe another plane. Scraped the right wing. Thought we were going down, but we held it together. Captain Green is flying. He is the best damn pilot I have ever seen. He says to tell you we need a heading now, or we are ditching in the next 15 minutes. Caldwell watches the RDF needle. It holds steady now, pointing 17 degrees left of his current heading. He calculates quickly. If Blue 3 is northwest of him and heading roughly south, and he is heading northwest, they should converge in less than 10 minutes if both hold course. But if the bomber changes heading, or if the wind pushes them off track, they will miss each other in the darkness and never find each other again. He makes a decision. Blue 3, listen carefully, turn to heading 160 degrees, maintain 6,000 feet, reduce speed to 140 knots, and transmit continuously. I am going to fly a reciprocal course and intercept you visually. Weatherbird, our magnetic compass is spinning like a top. We cannot hold a steady heading. Caldwell feels a stab of fear. Without a working compass, the bomber crew is flying blind, literally. Any turn could send them in the wrong direction. Any course correction could be a course into oblivion. He thinks fast. Blue 3, do you have your directional gyro? Affirm, it is working, but it drifts. Good. Set your gyro to 160 degrees and fly that. Ignore the magnetic compass. The gyro will drift, but it will hold long enough for me to find you. Do it now. A moment of silence. Then, Roger, turning to 160, gyro said, we are on it. Caldwell banks the B-18 into a steep turn, rolling out on a heading of 340 degrees, the reciprocal of 160. If Blue 3 is flying south and he is flying north, they are on a collision course. In this visibility, that is exactly what he wants. He descends to 6,000 feet, matching the bomber's altitude. He slows to 130 knots, just above stall speed, giving himself more time to react when he sees them, if he sees them. The rain is so heavy that his windscreen wipers are useless, slapping back and forth in a futile rhythm. He leans forward, pressing his face close to the glass, searching the darkness for any shape, any shadow, any glint of metal. His eyes burn from staring. He blinks, rubs them, stares again. 3 minutes pass. 4, 5. The radio crackles with Blue 3's continuous transmission. Still on 160, fuel at 15 minutes. We are descending slowly, cannot hold altitude. Engines are running rough. Captain Green thinks we have water in the fuel. We took on rain through a torn inspection panel. We sealed it, but the damage is done. Altimeter reads 5,800 feet now, 5,700. Caldwell's eyes burn. 6 minutes. 7. Nothing but rain and darkness. And then, at 7 minutes and 40 seconds, he sees it. A faint silhouette, darker than the clouds, slightly below and to his right, a twin-engine shape with a high tail, the unmistakable profile of a B-25 Mitchell. Blue 3. He keys his mic, forcing his voice to stay calm. Blue 3, I have you visual, 12 o'clock low. You are directly in front of me. Weatherbird, we do not see you. Where are you? You will not see me. I am above and behind you. Hold your course. I am going to drop down and lead you home. He throttles back, descends to 100 feet, and tucks in behind the bomber, close enough to see the dark shape of its tail, the torn metal on the right wing, the thin stream of black smoke trailing from the right engine. But it is flying, it is alive, and Caldwell is going to bring it home. Now comes the hardest part, getting them home before the fuel runs out. Caldwell pulls out his chart, shines his flashlight on it, and plots a rough course. Henderson Field is approximately 80 miles southeast of their current position. Heading 130 degrees. Flight time at 140 knots, approximately 34 minutes. Blue 3 has 15 minutes of fuel remaining, maybe less. The math does not work, unless they get a tailwind. Unless the fuel gauge is pessimistic. Unless the engines hold together long enough to glide the last 10 miles. Caldwell does not believe in miracles, but tonight he has no choice. He keys his mic. Blue 3, new heading, turn gently to 130 degrees, hold 6,000 feet, reduce power to maximum endurance setting. We are 34 minutes from Henderson Field. A long pause. Then Captain Green's voice, tight and controlled. Weatherbird, we do not have 34 minutes. We have 10, maybe 12. I know. Fly the heading anyway. Lean out your mixture as far as you can without losing power. Feather any rough engine. I will stay with you all the way. Understood? Thank you. The bomber turns slowly, clumsily, wallowing in the turbulence like a wounded bird. Caldwell follows, matching every turn, every dip, every shudder. They fly together through the storm, to fragile machines held together by rivets, fuel, and hope. Slowly, gradually, the rain begins to ease. The worst of the storm is behind them, but the danger is not over. At 9 minutes into the flight home, Blue 3's right engine begins to cough. The RPM drops, black smoke pours from the cowling. Captain Green's voice comes over the radio, clipped and calm, right engine failing, shutting it down, feathering the prop. The bomber slows immediately, loses altitude. Caldwell descends with them, matching their rate of descent. They are down to 5,000 feet, then 4,500, then 4,000. If they go much lower, they will not have enough altitude to glide to the runway if the left engine quits. Caldwell makes a decision. He moves up alongside the bomber, close enough that in daylight they could wave to each other, and flips on his position lights. The B-18's wingtip lights glow green and red in the rain, small beacons in the darkness. He keys his mic. Blue 3, follow my lights. Stay on my right wing. I will guide you straight in. Captain Green's voice. I have you visual. We are with you. Good. Stay with me. We are 22 miles out. Caldwell turns his attention to his instruments. Heading 130. Altitude 3,800 feet. Airspeed 135 knots. He clicks his radio transmitter 3 times, the emergency signal for Henderson Field Tower. A moment later, the tower responds. Weatherbird, runway 30, winds to 80 at 18, ceiling for 100 feet, rain moderate. You are cleared for immediate landing. Crash crews standing by. At 15 miles out, the clouds begin to thin. Caldwell catches a glimpse of black water below, white-capped waves illuminated by a flash of lightning. At 10 miles, he sees the faint glow of the runway lights through the rain. At 5 miles, he begins his descent, dropping to 1,000 feet. Blue 3 follows, staggering on one engine, the crew fighting to hold altitude. At 3 miles, Caldwell sees the runway clearly now, 2 rows of dim lights stretching into the rain. At 1 mile, he pulls up and to the left, clearing the approach path. Blue 3, runway straight ahead. You are cleared to land. I will follow you in. Roger, Weatherbird. Thank you for bringing us home. The bomber descends through the rain, landing gear dropping with a mechanical whine, flaps extending. It crosses the runway threshold at 90 knots, too fast, but there is no choice. The wheels touch down hard, bouncing once, then settling. The bomber rolls down the runway, brakes screaming, and comes to a stop 200 feet from the end. Ground crews sprint toward it through the rain. Caldwell circles once, then lands behind them, taxiing to the ramp. As he shuts down the engines, the silence in the cockpit is deafening. His hands are shaking, blood has dried on his forehead. He is exhausted beyond words, but he does not stop. 8 bombers are still out there. Caldwell refuels, gulps down a cup of scalding coffee handed to him by Sergeant Lawson, wipes the blood from his face, and takes off again at 3:42 hours. The storm is weakening, but it is still dangerous, still vast, still hiding 8 bombers somewhere in the night. For the next 2 hours and 30 minutes, Caldwell flies a methodical search pattern, sweeping back and forth across the storm's predicted path, listening on every frequency, rotating the RDF loop constantly, hunting for signals. His eyes burn. His body aches. His mind feels slow, dulled by fatigue, but he does not stop. At 4:17 hours, he picks up a faint signal 63 miles west of Henderson Field. He homes on it, finds Blue 7 flying in slow circles, the crew completely lost, their navigator unconscious from hypoxia after their oxygen system failed. Caldwell guides them home, talking them through every turn, every descent, bringing them in on fumes. At 5:31 hours, he intercepts Blue 2 and Blue 9 flying in loose formation, miraculously still together after 5 hours in the storm. Their radios are damaged, transmitting only intermittently, but Caldwell locks onto their signal and leads them back like a shepherd guiding lost sheep. At 6:12 hours, flying on his last reserves of mental and physical strength, Caldwell finds Blue 5 limping along at 3,000 feet, both engines coughing, fuel gauges reading empty, the crew preparing to ditch. He talks them through a dead stick landing on a small coral atoll 32 miles north of Guadalcanal, guiding them down through broken clouds to a narrow strip of sand and rock. The bomber lands hard, the left landing gear collapses, but the crew survives. Caldwell radios their position to Henderson Field and requests immediate Navy rescue. At 6:48 hours, with the eastern sky turning pale gray with the first light of dawn, Caldwell lands at Henderson Field for the final time. He has been airborne, with brief refueling stops, for nearly 4 hours. He has flown through the worst storm of his life. He has saved 8 bomber crews. 64 men, 8 aircraft, but not all of them. Blue 6, carrying 12 men, is never found. No radio contact, no wreckage, no trace. Somewhere in that storm, they went down, and the sea took them, and no one will ever know exactly where or how or when. Caldwell will carry those 12 names for the rest of his life. Major Koenig meets Caldwell on the tarmac as he climbs out of the cockpit, legs shaking, face pale with exhaustion. Koenig says nothing. He just grips Caldwell's shoulder hard, nods once, and walks away. It is the highest compliment Koenig knows how to give. Caldwell files his after-action report in the operations shack, 3 pages of coordinates, radio frequencies, fuel consumption data, and a brief note at the end, Blue 6 not located. Recommend search at first light. He signs it, hands it to the duty clerk, and walks to his tent. He collapses on his cot fully clothed, boots still on, and falls asleep instantly, dreamlessly, for 11 hours. When he wakes, the sun is setting again, and the field is quiet. He walks to the mess tent, eats cold beans and stale bread, and returns to his tent. No one congratulates him. No one shakes his hand. The bomber crews who were saved are busy with debriefings, maintenance checks, preparing for the next mission. Life on Guadalcanal moves on. The war does not pause for one night of heroism. 6 weeks later, a clerk delivers a medal in a paper envelope, the Distinguished Flying Cross. The citation reads, "For extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight, Lieutenant Robert Caldwell displayed exceptional courage, skill, and determination in locating and guiding multiple aircraft to safety under extremely hazardous weather conditions, disregarding his own safety to ensure the survival of his fellow airmen." Caldwell signs for it, puts it in his footlocker, and never mentions it again. He continues to fly weather reconnaissance for the rest of the war. He flies through to more typhoons, maps wind patterns for the invasion of Peleliu, provides meteorological data for the Lady landings. He never fires a shot in combat. He never shoots down an enemy plane. His name never appears in the newspapers, but in the operations tents and ready rooms across the South Pacific, pilots know his call sign. Weatherbird, the man who flies into the storm when everyone else turns back, the man who brings you home. Robert Caldwell survives the war and returns to Cedar Rapids in October of 1945. He marries Helen 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the Methodist Church on 5th Avenue. He takes a job as a meteorologist for the United States Weather Bureau and spends 33 years forecasting storms, teaching young meteorologists to read the sky, mentoring a generation of scientists who never know about the night he saved 64 lives. He never talks about the war. When friends ask, he changes the subject. When reporters call after the war, asking for interviews about his Distinguished Flying Cross, he politely declines. When his son, Michael, asks him what he did in the war, Caldwell says simply, "I flew weather planes, nothing special." Helen discovers the medal 20 years after the war, wrapped in tissue paper in a shoebox in the attic, alongside a faded photo of 9 B-25 bombers on a tarmac and a handwritten note from Captain Harold Mitchell that reads, "To Weatherbird, you saved my life and the lives of my crew. We will never forget. Forever in your debt, Mitch." She asks him why he never told her. He shrugs and says, "It was just my job." Robert Caldwell dies on March 14, 1998, at the age of 79, in his sleep, in the house he and Helen built together, surrounded by books about weather and radios he never quite finished fixing. The obituary in the Cedar Rapids Gazette mentions his service in World War II, his long career with the Weather Bureau, his love of amateur radio, and his survivors, his wife Helen, his children Michael and Margaret, and 6 grandchildren. It does not mention the storm. It does not mention the 9 lost bombers. It does not mention the 64 men who owed him their lives. But at his funeral, 3 elderly men in their 70s, strangers to the family, stand at the back of the church. One of them is Danny Forsyth, the co-pilot of Blue 3, who traveled from Boston to say goodbye. After the service, he approaches Helen and Caldwell's children and tells them what their father did that night in September of 1943. He tells them that every year on September 19th, the surviving members of Blue Flight gathered in a small room in a VFW hall in Omaha, Nebraska, and raised a glass to Weatherbird, the pilot who flew through hell to bring them home. He tells them that without Robert Caldwell, he and 63 other men would have died in the storm, forgotten, their families never knowing what happened. He tells them that their father was a hero. In 2003, 5 years after Caldwell's death, the Air Force Historical Research Agency re-examines his service record as part of a broader review of World War II reconnaissance missions. They elevate his distinguished flying cross citation to include a Valor device, recognizing that his actions that night met the criteria for combat heroism despite the absence of enemy contact. A small ceremony is held at Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. The upgraded medal is presented to his daughter, Margaret, now 56 years old, a high school history teacher in Des Moines. She accepts it quietly, holding the medal in both hands, and says only, he would have said it was just his job. The B-18 reconnaissance aircraft that Caldwell flew that night, tail number 4-38173, was scrapped in 1946 at a surplus yard in Long Beach, California. No effort was made to preserve it. The logbooks and maintenance records were destroyed. The only physical trace of that mission is a faded entry in the Henderson Field Operations Log, dated September 19, 1943, written in pencil. Weather reconnaissance aircraft departed 0 to 37, returned 0645. Mission successful, 8 aircraft recovered. Crew, Lieutenant Caldwell, are 72 words. 64 lives, 1 night, 1 pilot. 1 mission that almost no one remembers. But the men of Blue Flight remember, every September 19th, until the last of them dies in 2011 at the age of 89, they gather in a small room in a VFW hall in Omaha and raise a glass. To Weatherbird, to the man who proved that a reconnaissance plane, ridiculed as useless, flown by a pilot with no combat kills and no glory, could be the difference between life and death. To the man who flew through a storm at midnight and brought them home. History remembers the fighters, the bombers, the aces with double-digit kill counts and names in the headlines. It remembers the aircraft carriers, the beach landings, the desperate last stands. It rarely remembers the weatherman, the reconnaissance pilot. The unglamorous, the unsung, the ones who flew alone into danger so that others might live. But among those who survived because of him, Robert Caldwell's name is spoken with reverence, with gratitude, with the knowledge that heroism does not always roar. Sometimes it hums quietly through the rain on old engines, guiding lost men home, one signal at a time, one life at a time, through the storm and into the light. If you enjoyed this story of courage and quiet heroism, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who loves World War II history. These stories deserve to be remembered, and your support helps keep them alive. Leave a comment below telling us where you are watching from, or share a story of an unsung hero from your own family's history. Subscribe to the channel for more true World War II stories that honor the men and women who changed the course of history, often in ways the world never knew. Thank you for watching, and thank you for remembering.